Morning again, Rinpoche. Thank you for these precious teachings on the Rice Seedling Sutra. And good morning, Katrina Brooks. Thanks for your excellent translation. And welcome to all our online participants. We're happy you can join us. We have one or two or more teachings with Genla. And so if you'd like to make an offering to Geshe for his teachings, or to Katrina Brooks for the excellent translations, or to the Abbey for hosting the teachings, you'll find out how to do that in the chat box. And just something to look forward to. Through his tremendous kindness and generosity, Geshe Thabkhe has agreed to teach on Nagarjuna's precious garland. So after a short break with these teachings, keep an eye on the Abbey calendar for that sometime this spring. We'll begin with some preliminary prayers.
To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, oneness gone, for destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, door of the world, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans to you, the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With your body's form supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best supreme guide, to you I bow. With a supreme science face like a spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not incomparable, wise one, to you I bow. Great compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainees. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the foe of false, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, foreland, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you, may all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratnamanda Kandiryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
This one?
Jason again.
Oh, yeah. Order, huh? Mission do a color junjaba, Gunjur Shawa Chuba, the Shinshik. Wombo Shishin, Rabshi Shilla, Kenya, Shubatella Chasa law. Oh, yeah. That's your neighbor Kulon, oh, Simja Tamji. Dongele Trevachidora. Simja Tamji Kue Dongele Trevachawa. Trevor Chief Tumgegi. Langdor Jene Tamji. Shengengi Kunkunse, Yode Kundengi Kibushi, Kibu Sanje Shichawa, you a chawa samsa. Or teach you do anything you chigi. Sanje Songbe Chuya, Tabada Samba, Gombachan, any rimgi. Sanje Yukova Tobachagi, and Kulon Setam, Samba Shusa.
So, to begin with, we should set our motivation, thinking that in order to free sentient beings, to bring them out of the sufferings of samsara, I myself will strive to become a being who can teach all of the points of what is to be adopted and what is to be abandoned. I myself will become a Buddha. And in order to do that, I am going to, in stages, listen to this translated teaching of the Buddha, hear it, meditate, hear it, reflect on it, and meditate on it, and so that I might myself become a fully enlightened being. One should set a motivation for listening to the teachings.
Oh, yeah, I'm just something to less one. Oh, Minda Sugi Nuguti, a dog in my chest, etc. Shiba Minsu, the Sigora. Shiba Minda Su, Shipumbu, and Sugi Pumbugi. This is what Minda Sugi Nuguti, I say. Dog in my chest. Oh, dog in my chest. Shangi my chest, Yige my chest. Bonjuk my chest. Duji my chest. Oh, then the dog my chest said, they did it. Wakasura. Dangi Gawate, Jumele Gawate. Jumeba Dangi Gawate, the dog, Jeba Yeswara. The Dambimba Sanashi. Mobu Kangali Kuyo Marisa. Koran Shingi Toyam, but Esa. Oh, this is what dog Jeba Mari, Koran Kim, but Eswara. Dog my chest. Oh, then. Oh, that Deliati Mambuyungiva. Pechaja Shegora. Mobu Kangali Kut and Kanke Komaris. Mabje Dong, Tata Pata Yevata to suit, Dange Songesu Yomar, Koran Shinki to be a desura. Samala Nombo Yora, Kambal Suyonge, Sama Nombo. Tadi Mevshas, oh, Tayons. Or Teme Nombo Tia, Neko, Susonge Yomare, Koran de Ranshi Chato desura. Oh, did I shingo some the some dele? Yomare, Tagaki, Sigara. Rangikivares. Oh, that Delia, Tagaki, and you may have a chicken, and the Kadu in a Tabaki Shora. And the Zambul in the two Mavelet and Kigur, and then I'm going to come. Shadat in the two Mavelet Kishora Asara. Kumile cannot thought to kill Tavaki Yogara. Marata to Kigmar and Dale, two delicate, two delicate Mare, Lumba delicate and delicate Marisana, and then delicate make a Cusacares. Two delicate, didn't make a Cusacares, could you let turn a mother, shake Cessation Diomara. Sako Jumile Kawayuna, you chillikina, you tamjelike. I'm gishing dorbs in it, how you and a man a tamjelike. Oh, then it two chillikina tamjelkos. Chilike, chile make a Lubakashi, Kashi Magina, Cusede, to the gala to your teaching sansa, Chazan sansa, Kigo, Telemasandi, Kigo Marese, what did you are? Jumile cannot thought to Kyoto, cannot thought to kick you, but usually can you tamjelike, usually can two tamjelike, 20 sugar. And the machine or teacher.
So picking up in the text, in the English we have, this is on page 9, beginning with, and that sprout of name and form was not made by itself, not made by another, not made by both, not made by Ishvara, not transformed by time, and it will go on. So here, when it comes to this sprout of name and form, and again, name is referring to the 4 other aggregates aside from form. So here, the first assertion is that it's not made by itself. So those who assert that things are self-arisen are really saying they arise without a cause, like the Charvakas, for example, who would say that things just naturally arise. Like, for example, if we look at the feathers of a peacock, they have that kind of elaborate coloring and so forth, or like the sharpness of a thorn, the roundness of a pea. There's nothing that we can say, oh, that's caused by this, but instead it's just sort of naturally like that. It's self-arisen. And so here they would assert that all phenomena can arise then without a cause. Now, in terms of refuting that idea, if we have this kind of arising of a phenomenon without a cause, then it would always have to arise, right? There couldn't be any differences in terms of, well, it arises in this place or it comes about at this time, but rather it would have to arise at all places or at all times, because again, there is no cause. To assert that kind of causeless production is really to say that things arise permanently. They would always have to be coming about. So for example, if you were to assert that, then like a mango tree wouldn't need heat. It could be arising in any place at any time. So here, obviously, that's not how this works. But the main objection with the idea of being self-arisen, in this sense, arisen without a cause, is that it would always be coming about. You couldn't have things that are occasional, like occasionally in one place or occasionally at one time, but rather would always come about. If it's in one place, it's in all places. If at one time, at all times.
Yeah. 근데 다래 깨셔야 돼. 그런 데 말이지. 코란 레께 용기 연애식으로 깨고야 요 말. 코란 담보 여차데. 코란 깨고야 요 말을 시거라. 다래 깨셔야 돼. 랑게 규매발레 깨가 예세니 깨셔야 코란 데 말이지. 깨나 교단 깨질을 때는 깨고래. 배나 가와 봉벌을 속만한 시에 시거라. 어디지라나.
So here, the fallacy with saying something is self-arisen is then actually that you couldn't even say that it arises. If it already exists, if it is already there because it exists in and of itself, then to say that it is produced or arises actually contradicts that.
Oh, then it does shell me, said Dale Chigumare, Shelle Chigumare, Shelle make you say the Karsuversa. Young Chiruba, Da Nanga Chibe, keep it da sessiora. Mila Soba Chuchi, Shanky Tenchi, they say Tachiora. Mila Soba, Shanky Tenchi, Nanga Chibe, keep it. The Yobal then and draw out on Turba than Lega Kanga took you at Sigura. But in the Zanko Dag and Nanga Chibe, Kibu. Shanky Chebaya Mares ora. Oh, the Shelley means said. Yeah,
So here, then there is the not made by another. So here, in this sense, there are those non-Buddhists who assert that there is a kind of self within beings. It's almost like an inert self, but it is the experiencer. It's kind of the one that enjoys or experiences all things, but it doesn't itself actually act. So here, this saying that it is sort of arisen from another in the sense that there is a self that is somehow other, that is the one that experiences this. This is the fault here.
Oh, the Shelley Kiwa Tegma. Oh, Nigale Kiwa is an Asura. Dale Magina and Nigale Kiwa Yomara, Rere Magina, Nigale Kiwa Tegma Resora. Yeah.
So then, to say that it is not made by both, again, to have this, if you have eliminated the possibility of a self arising, in showing the logical fallacy of that, and then also the kind of arising from a distinct other that is unconnected, if both of those are not acceptable, not logical, then again, it's not logical that it could be arisen from both self and other.
Oh, yeah, this was. Oh, go let's start. Oh, dog match, shangy match, you get match, yes. And won't you get match, yes. Won't you last over on the daddy, Cheva, won't you last over to the Chevaresina? Dear my race, were. No, you are going to touch about now, dog case or yam to miss us. Daddy gave a yin, give a chase, Mr. Tandos on teach. Cheva will you are the cartel. Doesn't want you much, yes, it is. Won't you last over dog in it? Couldn't to turn the Chevares, dear my race, were. Do you my use and it? Do you want again? Do you talk by your actually about 2,000 to give her? Do you talk by one again? You queer than you lawyer than you might die on 2 you girls know what do you do about Eswara? Do you say the Congo Chavachetan Chilitene? You want to Panam Sachin, the Mindu Shagon was 2 Koran 2 tickets you Amara. No teacher.
So then continuing, so not made by itself, not made by another, not made by both, and not made by Ishvara. So here it's not as though a creator, a kind of god like Ishvara, is the creator of all of these things. Particularly in this context, we have seen how it, as was listed above, it does not occur to the karma or to these various factors that they are performing these functions. There isn't this like thought or intention of a creator or otherwise that precedes the unfolding of this kind of dependent origination. So it is not made by Ishvara in the sense of some kind of will or intention that precedes it, that of a creator god. And then it is also not the case that these phenomena are transformed by time. And here, the non-Buddhist notion of time is some kind of like permanent force that somehow causes the unfolding of all of these various events. It's not the case that this permanent entity of time could act as a force in order to bring about the various changes. So this is as opposed to the Buddhist notion of time, particularly the Prasangikas, as something that is a non-associated compositional factor, not to be considered something that is like a permanent force.
Oh, yeah. The Rangshile Machus, Savi Rangshin, Chiso, the Machusora. Transamba to the Chiso session go Tabachi orders, the Miduchireke, Carsoda. Some them are to the Truvasora, the Miduchima. To the Trubada, then Bode. In a take Kokulu, your mother, take Koya Kanga to take a service Chiso, say about. Oh, Savi Rangshin Chiso, or take it much at this order. Oh, Cavaleso, oh, Shaleme. Oh, Cavaleso, Shalemacho. What Shile Macho Stira. I Chebala Raleba, my essence, then Chebabul Ralen Kevamare. Two Memene Kevamares, and the country resena. Raja, agent of China, Patamani, Yuvata, Manda Santa Dembata. You are. And it can't shine some my case on a ninja chane. My head, you are not shitty shoot of this. Shiba me suit to Grisagora. Oh,
So then it says, not arisen from nature. Now here, this is referring to the kind of primal substance that is asserted by the Samkhyas, for example, that there is this kind of like stable, elastic, like this primal substance that then gives rise to various manifestations. This too, although it's not like those who assert a creator God and there's some kind of will, this as being like the nature from which everything arises, that is also not an acceptable proposition. And then not dependent on an agent and not born without a cause. Now, not dependent on an agent is like, again, some sort of creator, someone that is acting in order to make this happen. This is not the case, but rather, as it says, and it's not born without some kind of a cause. Nevertheless, if the mother and father unite, the time is fertile, and the other conditions are gathered, then because the causes and conditions are not deficient, then there will be giving rise to name and form and so forth. So if we are talking about womb birth, if all of the kind of conditions are right, the mother and father coming together and it being the right time and so forth, then there will be the arising of a name and form. It is not due to any of those other types of production as listed above.
Oh, yeah. Oh, talk about this. Jimba meba. Oh, yeah, take this one. Nisam choras, maying it, tetanter. Yawadan dembe, seven number sheba. Tamida, sugin, you can go back to Boshawati, but this one. Oh, take this one. What is Lona?
No.
Mida Sug Shiba Minsuti to Greshe.
No. So then here again, nevertheless, if the mother and father unite, the time is fertile, and the other conditions are gathered, then because the causes and conditions are not deficient in those dharmas without a governor, without the notion of mind, without grasping, equal to space, and having the essential nature of the mark of illusion, consciousness that is a seed that relishes in experience will produce the sprout of name and form in this and that mother's womb, the place of birth, reconnection. So here, describing the kind of process by which one takes rebirth, if all of the causes and conditions are gathered, then this will bring about name and form.
Oh, yeah, that is better chana share. Minda Sugan, you could do about to Gresha, Dita Desha. Tandil Kachi to Tobacco Yora, Chiribada to Tobacco Yora. Karsugas Kira Samal Wang Yuchi gave ta mess to us. Shibabu ta mess. Taga Samlatani Kulungu, your mana, Igresu to us. Shibabu your maras, ta mela. Te Kulun Samlatani Kegures, Keku Marisi to us. Te Natal Halake, Mele Kitchen, Le Mambo your Vasa. Let Tezukanga te teaching like Kigres or Kewakanga. Halake or Melike or the Kumangu or it is some Koranke on Guina. Shanda Samlutange Tawon Yuchinge or Mare Samlutan Soge, teaching do Kewamambo do a Kyo good race Kerala. Yena and ladly I can you. Sendilla you chora. Tonjo you less. Kiwachima you egg Kenen you less. At each madelation, Landra Shella you less. And yet till a membership, Casura. Then they came membership. Kadukan attended membership called Mangibashura, Mangibelashura, or Tinder Namshati Rungumarese. Kiranchi, Yababu Tas and get Kangalong, you can get you down. The Samlutan, the young man. You talk about some young women that you are letting you Mambo saw the ora, the Koran to Yare and goodness. And the ticker that you could ask this. Oh.
So then this is an example of like taking a rebirth, that when all of the causes and conditions come together, then that will come about. And so here, the kind of those that do assert the will of a creator as being necessary for this kind of production or rebirth, they have this sort of doubt. They say that well, even if there is no kind of creator, even if there is no sort of will of a creator that comes before, then won't this karma sort of all bring about its results all at once? So, for example, we can see that there are karmic actions that are the results of which are visible, will come about in this life. And then there are those kind of results leading to a birth as a god or as a human. and those that are experienced sort of with those next in the next life. And then there are those that are not certain. It may be in our next life or many lifetimes into the future. And they are sort of like, well, why is it that some would come about sooner than others? What is it that then causes that kind of difference between the karmas that we experience in this life, say, versus in a future life? So this is the kind of qualm that arises for those who would assert that there is a creator or some kind of will necessary to bring these things about.
Oh yeah. D'accord. Toi de pêche de chez toi. Dans vos pêches qu'on est chez toi. Dans vos taniers, vos chaînes, y a été pêche à chez toi. T'es car chez toi, c'est na. Migi number chez ni kyunga le chung de chez toi. Migi number chez ba d'abord de kyunga le teni chung de chez. Migi number chez ba de souta. Migi da ta gen tema ta gen da. Nawa ta hote zole teni kigwara. Migi number chez ba kiwate. Chendela nyong yugi legi pelcha yora. Tanda ran chendela gazu migi tanu mil jan pajo nawa chansuna suji tratu jimaka shira. Tanda yongu doa yin rumbu marwa. Chendela ya nyawani gyue le yora es di peti shig yora. Oh di karshik dosina. Oh migi number sheba di kyunga la tene chunga re shig yora. Kyunga di karesina migi la temba. Ten miwa kora, migla temba, migongbola temba, ashe. Mitene kasara. Migla temba, sudan se, miginde, yu migin sudi kora, tel tembura, sudan ashe. Nawa danse, mig tonga ina nawa kora, nagunang tunga marwa. Amjo nyendo ina, nagun ina mena keke yo mara, riya da kalsa ina ke, sangu mara. Migi number sheba, chunga nga kanshina. Ten, Tagin sigwara, tagin mewa la temba, migin su la temba. And then nawa, naguma imba, nawa yoba, nawa da cheba. And then namka, tongsan yokura, kapshanet ping marwa, tabaji kapshanet tung marwa. Tongsan danse. Teke ba, yila cheba. Tema tagin sigra. O ti tagin sigra, nga sura chi tasamna, yidi tichol tegura. Tema tagin. Some the patient that ling de yona, me down de yona, tongumare. Some the patient that ling de yona. The Mantaki say, Kuarako. Ticholi yide tegura, me tired, I'm joining and Rexetta to Pacho, yide tichol machona. Yid the patient that the enemy than a machine kerosig I'm so too mare. No, Tinangarazo, something same young to the Huda. Tomato that seemed to buy into. What is on the Temataki the car race agora. Oh, Tesoletan and a kegurese. Ah, Cossada. Yila cheba laya ten, make a number sheba, jungo ose. Oh, Tibodo chilana.
So then here is following that is given an example of like the kind of karma that we are able to watch unfolding, like the karma that ripens in this life. And this is sort of an example of that. So for example, in this way, visual consciousness arises through 5 causes. So here, when we think about the arising of our various sense consciousnesses, they need things like the object condition, the dominant condition, the immediately preceding condition. All of these kinds of causes and conditions come together to give rise to, for example, visual consciousness. So this is sort of like an example of the kind of ripening of karma that we might see in this life. Here, it describes how, visual consciousness arises through 5 causes. What are the 5? Depending on the eye, form, light, space, and attention produced from that, visual consciousness arises. Regarding that, the eye performs the function of the basis of visual consciousness. So we need to have the kind of dominant condition, the eye sense power, a functioning eye sense power as a cause or a condition for giving rise to, for example, visual consciousness. And then there needs to be the object object condition. So form is what can be taken as an object. So form performs the function of the image for visual consciousness. And then in order to be able to see something, we need to have light, right? So light performs the function of illumination. And space performs the function of non-obstruction. Again, if we have something like immediately touching our eye or too close, there's no way that we can actually perceive that. So space is necessary in the sense of performing the function of non-obstruction. And then attention produced from that performs the function of taking notice. And this is really getting at the immediately preceding condition in the sense that we have to be paying attention. If our mind is distracted to something else, then we can't pick up, say, a visual object. So in this case, like we can see that when our mind is distracted away, we don't necessarily register visual or auditory objects and so forth. And so the attention, really, this is getting at that immediately preceding kind of condition of the moment of consciousness that goes before. And attention then produced from that performs the function of taking notice.
뭐야? 나텔라 자와치다 시도아. 미기 왕부대 가르 자와치 그래서 tel라 미네 미기 넘버 쉐바 tel라 미네 미기 넘버 쉐베 아니 가서 야 tel라 미네 미기 넘버 쉐베 땡게 자와치도 따게 따게때 따게 지거라 개체셔라도 지거라 공부도 미와도 미 탄다면은 통하게 오마라 자와치도 네 수네 미기 넘버 쉐베 미그베 자와치도 미긴 지거라 통해 수지 거라 되면은 오마라 얘네 나와네 뭔배죠 나와데 나고 얘네 통마라 나와 반나니마다 나와도 어르시네 미실 수 나와체도라 나토그라 나고 얘네 나토마라 나외 자와데 그래서 나와네 뭔배 자와치도 뭔배 세와치 통토베 자와치 아니 넘버를 쉐바네 말에 남간에르바 남간에 밑에베 자와치 남가 동상 거르바 배순자데 연네 통마르바 즉버르주네 버루인 통마라 동바시고 군이 버루 동바거라 유대다 미 버루 동바거라 아니 남간에 밑에베 자와치 티버루 팀게 즉버르 셴다주니 트립제 통마르바 남가 동상 거르 군이 버루 들이야 되네 대단 중화 예라 제반에 중화 예라 제반에 선배 자와죠 다 예라 제바들 대마타게 이대로 이디 디쇼라 때는마도 고시에두고 말해 나와라지네 나라 망에 버려도라 난 토게 말해 봐 나게 말어 자고 대마타게서 디쇼라 이디 때고라 미 동야유나 이마다니요 말해 암조이나 고 참살라 이 현다 코데요나 Cessation 아마고 용기도 어디서 어디부터 지람나 this one.
So here then, as far as the like kind of function of each of those, again, regarding that, the eye performs the function of the basis of visual consciousness. So when it comes to the sort of dominant condition or the empowering condition of visual consciousness, one needs to have a kind of sense power, this visual sense power that is free from fault. If you have a faulty eye sense, there's no way that you can give rise to a visual consciousness. And so too, one needs to have the object condition, the proper kind of object, a form that can be taken by, taken as the object for visual consciousness. And then there needs to be light. Again, light forms the illumination and it creates the kind of conditions of illumination that allow us to be able to see. We need the sun, the moon, some sort of electric light, whatever it might be. But in darkness, we're not able to see. We can't actually perform that kind of function of visual consciousness. So light performs the function of illumination. It removes the kind of darkness such that we are able to actually see. And then we need to have space as a condition as well, in the sense that space performs the function of non-obstruction. So if we have something like pressed against our eye, we're not able to perceive that as a visual object. And so too, if there is something obstructing it, like a wall in the way, we can't have the visual consciousness of whatever object it might be. And so space is a necessary condition. And so too is having our mind attentive to that object. So this is really referring to the kind of attention in that our mind is pulled to take a notice of or attend to a particular object. We can see that if we are totally distracted, if our mind, like say we are distracted by something else, we might not hear what is being said, for example. And so one needs to have the function of attention or actually taking notice in order for that visual consciousness to arise.
Oh yeah. Oh, that make a number sheba, Susan make a number sheba kebala, can't in the Sanguru Eswara. Teta mena can't do Kayano Chimasana Nike. Teta mena make a number sheba, Kyor Minjurki se. Kangese, Nange Kichi, make Masawa Majurva. Majula station to autumn me check can't go Chanson Sura. Station to Sultan, Nawata, Namka Tonsanta, Teta Joa Yila Chebe Yichi, begin to get the Mata get Nawata Kanga Chanson Sura. Somewhere you the Tamjan Duvale, and the caress make a number ship on Joa Guru Osere. Or Tiba to Chilana, yeah.
No.
Lotion.
So here again, without those conditions, so when all of these conditions are assembled, then we can give rise to visual consciousness. But without those conditions, visual consciousness will not arise. But when the eye, the internal sense base, is not deficient, and similarly form, light, space, and attention produced from those that are not deficient, from the assemblage of all those, visual consciousness will arise. So here, in order to give rise to a visual consciousness, we have to have a functioning sense power. We have to have the proper object. We have to have the proper light and space and so forth. And if all of those things are assembled, then one is able to perceive visual forms.
Oh yeah. That tell a meanness you do that it round Jambul Changmaluangenge, round the Tabachi or the Sura. The Rama Tade Koyomar Changmaluang Juchinge. T any Kulung Samlutan, the Loyo at the Mena, and it is a Kanga Yungu Mare Sigura, Tete Yon took with Sigura. Teta Mena, Sutanda Kento Masana, Teta Mena. Tage or the Timare. Tedala mini se tam Chebabo da Loyo at Bakawa, Titon da Shegura. Dissembly Shawura. Tamjela Wang Junge, Tabe, Tawa Rawachi or some Gora. Tinashingarazo, Nalo, the Sosolaya, Rawe Tachi Yosam. Ti won't you chesser some Gora. Chita Yonza, Samalia won't you chinge. Tabe, Tawa Rawa, Sangma, Tapu Jangachi or some Gora. Te and some Lucaratana, Tinashi Yungo, some Gora. Garazo nga said Nalo Chi, some Shivis. Ti Karasam Natinashi did the Chevo de Covidimas, Kangachevo, Tindre some Lucogora. Or Tipa maps were Tandala, and they contain a Mambucharson Italia. Ella Mini, Dinyam do Tage, because a number ship attended Chow Chow, Yam do Messamsus. Then there's some local cocoa mares, Kukin Sana Diguaresora. And if Sujan Dinyam do Tane, make a number ship, and making chicken some, and take some local mares. Now I am parking now then Dinyam do Tane, make a number ship ala suit Bangumba, number 7, Chow chicken some tender some Lua Maresora. Namgayan Dinyam do Tiniparu Tong Sanderwa, Namgayan Dinyam do Tage, make a number sheba. La Mitribe Chawachi, Parutombachi, Mabachi, Chalachune, Tipkirwa. Eco Chawachi, Tonsa Yeza, Tipkimarwa, Toya. Mitribe Chawacha, no Messim Sosa. Tetan Joa Yila Cheba, the Gesora. Tage, Yila Cheba, and Dinyam do Tage, make a number shebe, some be Chawacha, shares ora. Me the figure you did Toya Hakoyate, ye the Tena Yungua. Yeah, which a matena, nala mangi da zani ma don't get the nala ma tende dendura. And the same so make a number of sheba ya dinyam do. Tane ta make a nam shetiga o nga kanga. The konzuku ya ke son something tende samli ke komaro. Kyujin sansona koran rahame ba ke ogure sigara. Number sheba ya dinyam do. Tane ken de da ke sunyam do mesim dese. When janse Juda ken Keta yubale make a number sheba kyo. Kyujin sansona ko ke ogure sigara. O diba to chin do na de. Yeah.
So, then it says, regarding that, it does not occur to the eye. I perform the function of the basis of visual consciousness. So again, here there is, for those non-Buddhist schools, they would assert that there is a kind of like autonomous, independent creator that has the ability to create whatever they might think, whatever they might will into existence. Now, this has been repeatedly kind of refuted through these same sort of going through, recognizing that each of the kind of causes and conditions, in this case for visual consciousness, doesn't have the sort of thought, the autonomous kind of independent will that says, oh, well, I'm performing this or that function. So there is that sense of a kind of creator that is autonomous and unitary and permanent, asserted by non-Buddhist schools, but we all have this in the sense of an I. Like we have this thought of having a kind of autonomous I that like just as we think we are able to do. But that isn't what actually accords with reality. As it explains here, regarding that, it does not occur to the eye. I perform the function of the basis of visual consciousness. It does not occur to form. I perform the function of image for visual consciousness. It does not occur to light. I perform the function of illumination for visual consciousness. It does not occur to space. I perform the function of non-obstruction for visual consciousness. And it does not occur to attention produced from that. I perform the function of taking notice for visual consciousness. And it does not occur to visual consciousness. I am produced by these conditions. So it isn't as though each of these has this kind of sense of or autonomy, a kind of will or drive behind them. Yet, nevertheless, when these conditions are present, visual consciousness will be born. Likewise, this applies as appropriate to the remaining sense organs as well. So here, although there is no such will or kind of drive of a creator, when all of the causes and conditions are present, then these things will come about, like, for example, visual consciousness.
Oh yeah. That deshindo ombo lama namla chiri so charo suda. Tanda megi number sheba ge su tonjule kenga chikudo atinashi. Tanawe ombo sina tinashi. Ne ombo che ombo lujo ombo tozu tension spachana. Nawa ombo re tatobale ya. Nawa de kugumarwa. Na wina keshena kodura. Shenda de kaya yune atu tongumara. Tiparu tombo mena. Sikba jabsha na chipe kashana tugumara. Kinashi na ombola ta na shira na gungina timakagra. Kalsaya na sachora. Lichiri sa yungra. Oh, tatezu ya chirigsupa. Charge tinashi. Judan kete da tansona. Big number show, na number show, namshi ke yungris. Ke tezu ke yu samsa sangumare. Genge namshi diga nga konju ke samsa samba komare kyujin tansona.
So again, likewise, this applies as appropriate to the remaining sense organs as well. So all of these, just as like for our visual consciousness, we need the proper kind of causes and conditions assembled. So too for our auditory consciousness. Now, this is, it applies as appropriate to the remaining sense organs. It's not as though we need the condition of light in order to be able to hear. We are able to hear in the darkness, but we still need to have the kind kind of conditions of space, of functioning sense power, and so forth. If there is something obstructing our ability to get that sound, then we're not going to have a kind of auditory consciousness. And so too with our sense of smell and taste, these two don't need illumination or our touch. We are able to do that even in darkness. But it also does not need to be preceded by this kind of thought or, oh, I'm performing such and such a function, or the visual consciousness or whatever consciousness thinking I was arisen from such and such causes. This happens in the absence of that kind of will.
Oh yeah. That on the Karishek do Senatiro Akasura. Oh, Tadimir, Toshas. Oh, Tunda P. You tinda Sansona Koke on Guresi, Tication Buresigora, Mado de Chebabo Samluda Tugmarese. You can't desert, the chick Matana Kigmare, the Kanga Sanson Chigris. You don't get Korangi one gets over the Mato Shandak. You may assembly, you may the top of your met in the Tugmare stick or oh, teacher, yeah.
So here, before we get into this next part, it's really emphasizing the fact that when the causes and conditions are complete, then something will come about, even in the absence of the kind of will of a creator God or their intention as such. But rather, when all of the causes and conditions are complete, then that phenomena will arise. And so this is really the main point that is being made here, is the necessity of looking at just the aggregation of those causes and conditions as how phenomena are produced.
Oh yeah. That the nature Gaya should to the way. Should get you all there. Oh, that did it. Oh, God. Yeah. The Cavalleso. Soon it temperature. What a did it other. Tell a church Ganya should go. Oh, yeah. Tell a church Ganya. Jiden dinen Jiden Paruto. Mepon make oh, church Ganya. Jiden dinen Jiden Paruto Pogma resora. And Pogma residu Karasigoresana. Tandangarajo Samlana Cardos Samsa. Joachima Landuzanga Tire some. So Tande de drag some Rashkugua. The Poya yo Maris, Tina Dad Midi. Joachima Tundu Tar of Chikia, Tande de Pa Midi Pigan Donani, Mere, Niga Ingis Chagua. Copen Juni, Koran Chima, Menda Cage and Judu Mado, Tandangazu Ted with the so what did you the Pandu Marua. Can't do you any Pigachima, Joalangating as a meat and there's some little Geshe. Net don't do any tender assembly against the Kedura. The Kuni Kagarava. In a drongate that Tanda Tadita, Mamba Yuni Kagasosa, Pondo Marisa, Pondosina, Command Jurija began to that. Chiruban the Genecotis, some Givarakashe. Tade, Takbachibu Ramache, Sobod Maranalo Coranteora, Cocoran Katu Yanshandajana, Sobona Persia Roshana Shira. But in the dry Marisa, Kudan Yang Commander Medake. Koran chick jelly chick tune chick kenny pandrosha resura. Tunanganzo mammy does a pana hakodo. Mammy patus the mammy pasha tipa pacho de la shoe till shoe get kumedua. Koran gage and anybody or somebody or shibaki or num da toreda Koran zozo bato. Neko chi madame Koran geogramato. Titina poke kumedua. Oh, Tikenda Kugara Konyele Sigora, Meta Mana Yungumara, Ture Mana Yungumara, no Mana Yungumara. Ayinako, Jazukadu Kadulia, Chikichele, Chikiche, Namati Yebe, Gengi Chimachi, Levy, Kona Yunga, Tindugora. What do they with the big upon them? Drode Gayamara, or this way. Jiden Jiden Paru to Mapo Merky, Mapo Merky, Kudan. Judake Masawa Meba, maybe legend Drebunga by Yodo, Kujan Kanga Sansona, Lela Tene, Drebunya Yada, Tundra, Tewatunga Kanga, you are the Estigora. 티 가르스다. 대부 유도 오세. 야, 대지 람나.
Mm. So, here then, regarding that, while indeed no dharma at all passes from this world to the next, because causes and conditions are not deficient, the result of karma appears. So here we generally where it talks about then the nothing passes at all from this world to the next. We have this kind of thought of I, and it seems to us that this I, this self that we have, like this will go to the next life. Like I right now am a human, but maybe I will become a god in my next life, or an animal, or whatever it might be. But we have this sense that there's this I that's going to remain, that will be there in the next life, that will somehow be like transferred or passed through to our next life. And this obviously is not a logical kind of conclusion. If it were the case that we, as a human, this I that we have right now, were to pass to being a god, then we would somehow have to be both a god and a human. So here, when it comes to the kind of way in which we move to our next life, the self of now, this kind of I sense of I that we have right now, doesn't unchanging without transformation transfer to the next life, but rather is constantly shifting and subject to this kind of flow of causes and conditions. So here, it's not, again, as though we move from this life into the next life, we sort of like transfer or pass through, but are constantly kind of changing. Each moment is a change and a transformation. So we could think about it like in terms of a butter lamp. We can see the flame of a butter lamp, but it's not as though that flame is like transferring one moment to the next, is moving one moment to the next, but rather due to the kind of aggregation of these causes and conditions. We need to have a proper amount of oil, something that starts the fire, and so forth. For as long as those causes and conditions are assembled, then that will continue. And so too, when it comes to how we go on and take rebirth, how we move to a new life, it's in dependence upon our karma and all the kind of karmas that we have accumulated. But it's not as though there is something of this life that like transfers, is moved, passes through to the next life, but rather when all of the causes and conditions are not deficient, then the result of karma appears.
Oh yeah. Pena ngaranzu samle na tindestua. Angemane yo samgira ho danyi cheje te buchun tindesa. Ngema yobate tanda deyo marwa. Tanda yobate nga sanyi teche maoba teche gesute. Tanda yobate maoba na ko tirsu che teg mara ti tangzire to ara. Ngema de yu tanda kawayo ara. Yona buchun ju de tanda yokura. Ame kokbe na yonge de tanda yokura. Yo mara ti sama yo marwa. Kengo tanda kengo ngema yo mara. Ngema ne loti di yesute. Kengo ngema ne yo mara. Tanda bede nga shani nani pe tanda lochi jese jema denge tirsu sedo tanda yeba de mahobana ko denge suraja de tirsu sedo nga ma de majibu se tanda yeba de tagba sedo te tanda yeba se te mandroge te yo mare shege ya.
So we have this kind of sense most of the time, like, oh, I was here in the past, my prior self, and I'm going to do this tomorrow, and so forth. We have this grasping at permanence. Like we think, oh, when I was a child, well, in that form of a child, that child form has not continued on to now. And so too, when we have become old, it's not as though we were old from the beginning, but there is this sense of an I that is somehow like remaining constant. This feeling that the I that I was before is the same I that I am now, not recognizing the kind of constant flow of change. We have this sense of holding to a kind of permanence.
Oh yeah. Tanda pede kadishego suna che delia tanda ta nyebuche meki so tonga namshi kigre tratube namshi kigre te ro janjime namshi nga tanda kensani kigdoa. Ti pede kare suna o te nashi 통주 용주가 래 요래서 천대랑이야. 레산의 천대라야 용아주가 레요. 요래서 뒷배 되게 거네 시기어라. 통주 용주지 래 예배 뺄 시기어라. 빼고네 시기어라. 통주 용주 천대리야 레산의 천대라 대분용하시거라. 내가 아주 삼례샤고라. 그러나 남중 아주 sembi samlo chita sembelero internet diwange luke jawada nga ke je share kanga yakbu ju shu sigina tuga shu sigina sembi semba de samba na shichigora tele lesigora sa chende bele sa sabare ro kadu ina samlo kande tana le sembele keve chole ina da migeve chole ina da loma de chole ina da ba sem chunge chigora sembelera Teletene Ludanga Kone Kolekage Tuksha Yabushe Robache Karasamna Lunga Kone Chubache Stina Shiche Lerwa. Get Sendele Yabuche and Sendele Debu Yore Sigora. Tadingazo Chimachi did and delivering Musici Tuna Matuni Yora. Then a Mikashe Tambunin Lobjo Yabuche, Sambuche teacher, Tishaji, Shining Chimat and the Chego, some coach, Tinashi Yabuche College and Yayungura. 이기티에 자야에 롭초체에 가가체네 치마코 삼바나시 카리네 tonda 두에 용구도와 근데 리치에 요레세티 통존이 줄래라 카셰 두자셰지 삼르탄데 두자셰치데 체델코 두구페 마음부 녀에 요라 레 첸델레 체다 마데 왕레모티 통존이 줄래라 자 레레 텐데체 요레시고라 다 생가만에 사셰베다 첸델레 사베 레진 데부 미마투베셰 마음 발에 한 민게다 nga메데 탄데 민게 텐데 요라 어 데조텔이야 테네 케네 유주데 레šan다티 요라 자레 데부치에버시데 바데 여버여버지 제바부 순도 šan다 삼타지 마라 나라도 첸데 고숨빌라 제발 테네 고숨게 디두다 자와상에 강가 용숨 두고도 어디다데 첸데 레긴 데부치와 등숨도 투바 요셔 남도 용고도 Tire, Tina Shitine, Joanga Sasha Kashe, in the Yore Lande, Namsa Trashi Trawade, Sanjay Chimato, Didi Shasi, Tumarwa. That and then dig Tonju Yurgi lay be pet share, oh teacher. Tangan de Kene Yugi lay be Peshegora, the water, Hotel.
So here, this is giving the example. I mean, for example, the visual consciousness, when all the causes and conditions come together, then we give rise to a visual consciousness. And so too, we can have, when all of the kind of causes and conditions come together, the ripening of karmas that we have created in this life. So these are those kinds of actions that we have created that are going to bring about results that are visible to us, that are apparent to us. So when we have any kind of thought, we are creating karma that is intention, and then the intended karma that the kinds of actions of body and speech that are driven by that motivation, that intention. And so we are creating karma all the time with what we think, with what we do with our body and our speech. And so we can see that, for example, someone who might have the thought of like, I really want to do well in this life. I want to learn this particular thing. I want to achieve this particular goal. And by making effort at study, they are able to achieve that. That is something that is we are able to observe the results of those sorts of actions ripening in this life. We can see sometimes there are people who do really negative sorts of actions, and they are experiencing the results of those negative actions in this life. So this is sort of like visible karma, or karma that is apparent to us. Now, sometimes the things that we have done in the past, those kinds of karmas that we have accumulated in previous lives, those will create ripening results in future lives. And so knowing the various subtleties of karma is something that is sort of beyond our scope, but establishing the relationship between causes and effect can be done through this kind of looking at the results that ripen for causes that we created in the very same life. We can kind of establish the connection between those causes and their ripening result that happen in the same life. Now, for what comes below, this will be talking about the kind of karmas that we experience in a future life, having taken rebirth, how those come about.
Oh yeah. 당한 좀 되셔다. 걔네 연결이 레이베 빼드셔라. 센델레 매매저 겨와 지마들. 센델레 사벨레게 겨와 지마들이야네. 내게 남이긴 대부 매여 되셔라. 걔네 연결이 레셔라. 근데 그래. 야. 단 데이터 대해서도 페나 랍도 치베스 대패셔라. 페나 랍도 치베 멜론게 kengo 라서도 장마 연계서라 나보이는 동구 말와 장마서는 멜론 야보 치체 쉐고 동다서들 샤보 치나 이제나 동대는 세버시 통구라 랍도 치베 멜론게 kengo 라 신기수 신수의 소소 동으로와 동게 송에 나와야 남게레스 제신기 송에데 신 멜론게 나도 마페 매게세 이가도 동게 차셔로지 피그날 멜론안 루요 마르와 얘는 루요 마 코란 교진 산도 비가 차려 거라 봄자 트다 니마르지 샤네티 에네 차르사텔 초다 정부다 지가요다 출루사 내자르 거제 팀봄 거제 이제 뒤치도 고샤용 거도 디날 로나네 코란 데네 제세도 게르 뉴르도 가시요레 디르도에게 요 마레 파게 로고 마레스 규진 상선의 버저드 투비용과 레시거라 예다데 베나 랍도 체베 멜롱게 징고라 신기 송에 나와야 신 멜롱게 나도 마포메게세 이 차샤로지 디나 반도요 마르 코라 규진 상도 잔에 비게 투비용거라 이게 교단께 마상아 매베셔 신동어 봐요데 규진 상선은 그 제신기 송에데 세브제 통용거라 뭐 봐야 요도세 대신도 데네자 소리야 시표나 시표가 멜라 데네 속보나는 거라 시도서 속보나는 치턴 동게르지 해변 나오셔기와라 데 시표 엔진에 파조지나래 깨와데 데네 쇼도야르지 소소 쇼도베 나오여라 데 말에 고지레레레 찍셀리 찍투 코란지레 루여라마도 오야 대신도 데네자 소야 시표바 멜라 챈도야 마제데 교단께 마상와 매베체 레지 대bungan 바야 요도스 교치마 교와 카르라나 tilaya 요레스오라 돈다 소데 시르바토즈나 교알란데 코타 데탄다 요베테라 마주르체 파슈 팅도산 드레쇼라 풍부데 지르마도 다 지오 마레신 로샤오라 지나신 요 마레사 다이나다 카리나 ngobu코라 교단께 거 치마치 겐두고 아마도 저 때때날 봐 슈도하시오 말해서라 야 어디질로나
So then here, this next example, the next set of examples is giving a kind of how it is that karma that we experience having taken rebirth. So we can have the kind of karma that we experience in this very life when the causes and conditions come together. And then there is that which we will experience in a future life, having taken rebirth. So here, and it says, well, indeed, regarding that, well, indeed, no dharma at all passes from this world to the next. Because causes and conditions are not deficient, the result of karma appears. Thus, for example, though the reflection of a face appears in the orb of a clean mirror, while indeed the face is not transferred to the mirror, because the causes and conditions are not deficient, a face appears. So here, likewise, no one departs from this world and is born in another, but because the causes and conditions are not deficient, the result of karma appears. So here, in the same way that we saw, like for a visual consciousness to arise, we need to have all of the causes and conditions present. So too, like this example, in order to have the reflection of a face in a mirror, you need to have the mirror be clean and the face close to the mirror and so forth. If all of the causes and conditions are complete, then you are going to see a reflection of a face in that mirror. And it's not as though the face is somehow like transferred to the mirror, but rather when the causes and conditions come about, then you are going to have that kind of reflection. And so too, it's not as though there is the I, the self of this life that somehow is transferred to a new life. It's not as though one is able to, like the aggregates that one has now are kind of moved to or passed through to a new life. But yet there is this constant continuity of this constantly changing kind of object. So although, and the other example will come below of like the moon shining into all of these various vessels, when those causes and conditions are right, then you are going to see the appearance of such a reflection. But there is no self that passes through. It's not as though there is the like kind of self of this life that is somehow self-contained, self-sufficient, and then appears in a future life, but rather it is the case that there is this continuity of constantly changing moments that then when the causes and conditions are right, it will lead to the results of karma appearing.
Oh yeah. Don't they get you get lay. You have a petty shake to a petty connect kine. Go on daily much chimanyo eglet and you are this. Kine you did. Oh, Jason do the nature ship within this one. Could I get my son with a legend by you to also? Tiba this one.
Yes.
Oh, Tadine. Penas a tande da carcera. Lendran shella you lay. You have a petting giora. Lendran shella. Kiwa chima members at Chima Kaya Roa. Lendran shella you use the Kiwa Chima de members at Sumba Shibanga Bachaton Timbu Karina till Lendran. Tinyon Jiggy letter Lendran shella you lesera. Give a land and Tranga Shanta shella you let. What do you be peshegara? Tear yours. The tiring burrich in it is shit. Coco yara. Then Daway can go nese. Daway can go yara. Tiring buyara. Pase shitty in thing they draw this in it to your racing around Zambulin today. When ya no chungo, chu kawan Daway can go. Sunye now ya no chunjo chulu shavina. Ya shegura china, sora china, karina. Sunye de chartung bengi. Mobuchina tina ganga chagra, tuchi to chagra. No chungo chu kawan Daway chu kawa risk kawa nalis. Daway Kengurji Sunye, Nawayan, Daway Kengur, Daway Kengu ne, Mafi Mills, one Daway Kengu, you gave it in a Mayon, Jatina, shooter at the Mara. Kenani Shabuzun God and Gorgira, in Jojo Leduako. Koran de Tunjin Sana Namsan Charungora. Kengur Sunye, Nawayan, Daway Kengu ne, tine. Mafi Mergeson, what in a man day Yongo Mara. No chungo chu kanwe nando, soya me merges, in a yonitina lolia, should do it in Reke or Maresora. And Judah came my son, maybe said, the way can go to Ngambaya, Yotose, Melona, Kabayina, Chunu, that dinner, couldn't the way can go soon yet the Tongres or a savage. Oh, Jason don't deny. Suyan ship by Mela Shandoya, before Merge, couldn't get my son, maybe, sir. Dejin Debunga by a Yodo. Oh, this you are Tatunda, the Passera Landa Shallan you do less as one. Kenning you do Landa Shallan you do less shake door. Oh, Tibot Chidona, yeah.
So then the next example, again, here we have the example, the first was the karma that is experienced in this life, where we create the karma and experience its result in this life. And then the example of a reflection of a face in a mirror is the kind of karma that is experienced in the very next life, having taken rebirth, what one experiences. And then next we have the example of the kind of karma that is not definite to be experienced in the next life, but may be experienced in any of the lives beyond that. So here it says, for example, Thus, for example, the orb of the moon wanders 42,000 yojanas above. Nevertheless, the reflection of the orb of the moon appears in a small vessel filled with water, even though the orb of the moon is not transferred from that place. So, while indeed the moon does not go inside the small water-filled vessel, because the causes and conditions are not deficient, the orb of the moon appears. And so here again, when you have something like a vessel of water and the moon is above, if the causes and conditions are right, there will be a reflection of that moon in whatever sort of vessel has something reflective in it, whatever is a suitable kind of place for that to arise. It's not as though the moon itself like enters into all of these different vessels, or it's not as though there is some kind of transference, but even in the absence of that, when the causes and conditions are not deficient, as it says, then we are going to see a reflection of the orb of the moon. And so likewise, again, while indeed no one departs from this world and is born in another, because causes and conditions are not deficient, the result of karma appears. So even when we have something that is so far away as the moon, when the causes and conditions are right, that is going to lead to the reflection of that moon in various types of vessels. And so too with our karma, even if it is something that has been accumulated in the past, when the causes and conditions are correct, it will ripen. Likewise, indeed, while indeed no one departs from this world and is born in another, because causes and conditions are not deficient, the result of karma appears.
Oh yeah. Tante nga zo nyawar juwa mange bele pes chen shekdwa. Pendele tene nyawar juwa mange bele yose. Chichane drebu nyongure chichane nyongumare. Pena mege bele reje sa ne shauto mambu chene. Tontu reje ke reje na ko shauto mambu chene. Drebu meba cha yongura. Yan mele keche le reje yona ko tikba mambu sa kondu mambu chene. Mange ba che drebu nyawa meba cha durwa. 다음에 시그라 된대요 말 직전은 대부분 연구를 직전 대부분 연구 말에 어디 transition 망에 벨레스그라 뇨 내미 대부분 뇨에 된대 매버데 직전에 우리 직전 연구 말아 어디 시가 다 빼대 오 된대 가발레서 페나세 페나 메네 교단께 게 마차 게 차나 마차나 멤버게 교단께 초발에 바로스 메르지나 교제 마차나 바그마라 교단께 찬스는 멤버 용구라 데이터데 페나 메네 교단께 마차나 멤버게 교단께 초발에 바로 대신도 다보 매베 추스 대신도 다보 매베 추 다게 매바 대신도 다보 매베 추스야데 다가서다 지den지 가서 원주라 서버 다보 매베 추 강갈 원주 체계 나이 생애 서빈 삼사자 소에 다보 매베 추 다게 매바 추스 되게 왕자도 치러와 이와 다보 매나 대 왕자 대 용구마라 짐바 매바세 데 다게 진질라 발테니 추와 다게 틴데드레 고레 틴데드레 고마레 삼르타 손에 추소나 대 짐바 삼레왕게 추와 틴데 요마레 짐바 매바 남가 다 총바스데 랑신게 동바레 라와치 다지데 라와 고보소에 틴데 요마레 추남 랑신게 동바레 소라 랑신게 거레소 남가 다 총바스데 랑신게 동바셰 규메 체니게 랑신 달라세 규마캔데 다달랑보다 개바다 뱀에 마부트기와라 코트바나신데 요마르와 트바나신 요마르데 코 교단께 상선의 코 규마데 되게와라 이름부터 텐데 용세거라 어디나시 템버메나야 쳐도도 코 제바보메나야 템버메나야 라와치메나야 교단께 상대 텐데 용고요레세거라 규메 체니게 랑신 달라 교단께 줄고체 어데 교단께 남 마상와 매베셔 마상와 매베셔래 네께네 니점 저래 깨네 가르래 니점 사다 매 야이다 던도 가르께네 기그래서 니점 저래 마이게 다단데 마이 민데시 리나 저기 가서 내기나 마이게 대다들 사변 넘버 쉐바 레다 녀모바 남기 깨바세 시바 명수디 셔라 명다 속이 용어바 줍대 대다나 나게 땡진 데버 저 깨단 저라 따오서 나게 땡진 데버 저 컨디션하고 주다 깬다 저한테 따고래 삼고래서 쉐바보다 라와치 요바던데 라오에 쉐바보시다 라오에 쉐바보고 신길람니 좀 같은데 요 말에서 어디부터 진다나
So, here, then, there are, again, we have the kind of karma that is experienced in this life or that will be experienced in a future life. And then we can talk about the kind of karma that isn't certain. For example, if one, you may have created the karma to, say, be born as an animal, but through engaging in confession, in the practice of purification, you are able to eliminate that kind of karma, have it not bring about its result. So when it comes to karma, there is that which is not definite to be experienced in the sense that through the practice of purification or other means, it can not be made to not bring about its result. So here, then we turn to the next passage, which says, thus, for example, fire does not flame when causes and conditions are deficient, but from causes and conditions gathering, fire flames. So similarly, because causes and conditions are not deficient in those dharmas that are, and I'm just going to read this through first, so that are not so similarly, because causes and conditions are not deficient in those dharmas, without a governor, without the notion mine, without grasping, equal to space and having the essential nature of the mark of illusion, a consciousness that is a seed germinated by karma and defilement produces the sprout of name and form in this or that mother's womb, the place of birth, reconnection. So here it is the case that when these causes and conditions are not deficient, in those, and here it says those dharmas without a governor. Again, this is referring to those that are without some kind of a creator. We have this sense sometimes that there's like an autonomous, independent kind of creator that makes all of these various things. Now, these dharmas are without such a governor or without such a creator, without the notion of mine and without grasping. So here we might have the sense that it is due to the sort of blessings or the sort of empowerment by a self that is somehow truly existent, that these things have some kind of a notion of mine or exist in the way that they are grasped. And so this as well, these dharmas lack that kind of mine or the object at which one grasps. And then here where it says equal to space, these dharmas are space-like in the sense of they're not having some kind of inherent nature. They are empty of that inherent nature, sort of space-like in that way. And then, and having the essential nature of the mark of illusion in the sense that they appear one way but don't actually exist in that way. Such dharmas that, again, are without a governor, without the notion mine, and so forth, they are able to, you can have this kind of causality wherein a consciousness that is a seed germinated by karma and defilement produces the sprout of name and form in this or that mother's womb. Now here, this is specifically talking about the fourth link of name and form in the context of womb birth. And so this is the way in which that comes about, not through some sort of autonomous, independent kind of a self, but when all the causes and conditions are present, when they are not deficient.
Oh yeah. Tatela nange tension driver jo nambangarta des. Nange tente tutolia tenja nambangae konde shegdoa. Nga kanshena ase. Akbar Mahibadas, that Nugget engine to Majuma de Keurati, and Prevenal Tamuchi Lapsatin Godela Gumare. 나게 된지 되버죠. 딱봐 많이 봐 제발 많이 봐서 오늘 간거 나게 된지 되버죠. 거고라. 강신나세. 딱봐 많이 받아세. 제발 많이 받아. 와, 네. 포화 많이 받아. 교총을 대부 신분 중하다. 대단 자외 교도 생각에 권에 시행도 나게 된지 되버죠. 오야, 다들 가서래. 지들 딱봐 많이 신나서. 지들 딱봐 많이 신나서. 딱봐 많이 배출지 나게 된지 되버 근데 시행으로서는 강게 저를 탐에 치외 풍부 남자 신라서 그냥 가라도 치외 내가 그러지네 치외 내가지 풍부 나가 다 대주 상마시고라 이 신다지에서 단다 미제라 다 제말 하르게 그러지나 개외 차도 왜 풍부 남자 신데 제말 하르게 그나 야 전도 기그나 지기그나 대양 풍부 신다르와 지바 말와 개외 차도 왜 남자 신데에서 아니 타마 치외 풍부 강인 바더니세 타마 단다 치외 풍부 다다 로바 소소데 미디스고라 때 제마지 말에서라 타마 치외 풍부 강인 바더니 개외 차도베 풍부남 마인라스 마인지스 그게 사바로와 내 단단가 주요더라 어더니 타메 치외 풍부 남자 가라스 타메 단다 치외 풍부도 가급한 가그라 윤도라 가라 아니 개외 차도베 풍부남 중에서 tip은 가서나 아니 개외 차도 같은 중국에서 뒤단다 망가버지 반주예요 말아 뒤에서 딱봐 많이 넣어서 어디 디네 나게 된지 잡아줘 디네 봉게한테 다 피게 여반이들 배가가래서 산대 여바데 마주르제 퍼져 피게 교환라요 말해서 거라 포함 말해서 거다 마주르제 단단 간주 삼르나 여반나시 난 디네 네 피게 두르 삼 소수데 피게 두르서 삼르 코도 되어 말아 샤라사 니 최외 본부 남장가 돼서 개외 차도 왜 본부 남장 중에 돼서 딱봐 많이 넣어서 어디지 로나 야 되게 이제 다른 로차 돼서 야
So then so this is the way in which we should see internal dependent arising. So in that way, the dependence on conditions of internal dependent arising is to be seen. Now, regarding that, internal dependent arising is to be seen as fivefold. And here we did this in English as well, but this kind of needs to carry down to all of these. That it doesn't say internal dependent arising again and again, but we should understand that this is what it is referring to. And so it is to be seen as fivefold. And what five? Not eternalism, not annihilation, not transmigration. A great result arises from a small cause and the continuity of what is similar to that. And so the first then says, how is internal dependent arising not eternalism? Well, because the aggregates of death are one and those partaking of birth are another. So precisely those which are the aggregates of death, the kind of aggregates that we have at the time of death, those cease and the aggregates partaking of birth arise. Therefore, internal dependent arising is not eternalism. So at the time that one dies, the kind of aggregates that one has at that point are not going to remain, are not going to transfer or go into the next life. So precisely those at the time of death are not those that will partake of rebirth. And so here, because of the fact that there are the aggregates that one has at the time of death in one life and the kind of aggregates that one takes up during birth in another life are not the same. Therefore, we can say that this is not eternalism. It's not some kind of permanence.
Oh yeah. 다 지다르서 나게 된지 제발 중한테서 오라. 지다르 체바 많이 신나서 체베 수기 지금 말해서 오라. 그 가래서는 담에 치외 풍부 남장은 가라서 당당 아주 풍부 주어라. 집행엘 방가 담부 방가 차르체 전에 가찬 동바충 살아. 전에 치마도 용해도 말해서 오라. 겐가네 참지 체네 야고 용나네 균데디 체네 고용 거라. 이래 말해서 오라. 담에 치외 풍부 남장은 가라. 각발래 네. 개회 차도 풍부남 치순 중앙 말에서 와라. 마예세. 근데 풍부마 개회 내가 당배 다대 풍부도 좀 망가봐시. 아니 치마대 연구를 해서 대 말에서 와라. 망가발래자 마예게세. 담에 단대 개와 담하게 이 치외 풍부남장가라세. 개인기 체에서 각배체 개회 차도 풍부남 중국의 dünyam을 해서 오라. 세대 풍부도 좀 각과되다. 아니 치매 풍부도 좀 중화돼. dünyam의 수기를 마도 지den가 잘 경지 동바지샤 경체 아니 하사버지 중나 체벌 중으로 체벌 말해서 경투는 그래서 오라. 상대 도매주도 빼자라. 상쟁계는 초질이야. 잘라 망루스는 지대 야격으로 지대 야격보다 지대 만도 dünyam을 마도 지대 마 랩차는 제만 거의 안 들어야 요 말에 디나시 집어래서 dünyam 배출해. 담에 지외 풍부남 각보다 교화 지매 풍부남 중화돼 dünyam을 해서 나마디 교체는 좀 말해서 오라. 가라 경이게제 지매 가서래 개회 차도가 풍부남 상대 도매 수도 중화라 교디 대체를 채바 많이 넣어서 어디 봐도 진다.
So then next, how is internal dependent arising not annihilation? Well, the aggregates of birth do not arise from aggregates of death that have already ceased, and the aggregates of birth do not arise from the aggregates of death that have not yet ceased. So here, if one were to have the aggregates of death cease, like the continuity is cut, there would be no continuation. You couldn't have the arising of the new aggregates at the time of birth. And nor is it the case that you can have the aggregates of birth arise in the absence of those aggregates of death having ceased. So here, instead of that, but when the aggregates of death cease, at that very moment, the aggregates partaking of birth arise like the high and low ends of a balance beam or like a scale. When you have this kind of scale, when one end goes up and the other simultaneously goes down. So here too, when it comes to the aggregates of birth, they can't come about if you have cut the continuity of the aggregates at the time of death. If that's really severed and there's sort of like an empty space and then the arising of new aggregates, that's not logical. That's not tenable. But nor is it the case that we could have the arising of the aggregates of birth in the absence of those aggregates of death having ceased. So the ceasing of the aggregates of death and the moment of taking the new aggregates of birth are like the two ends of a scale. It has to happen simultaneously. You can't have the continuum be cut, but nor could you have new aggregates arise in the absence of the cessation of the old aggregates. So thus, internal dependent arising is not annihilation.
Oh yeah. 다 제대로 포함만 해놔서 좋아. 남기때 저거 좀 포함하래서. 그래서는 샘전지를 맨자와네 개와냠배 샘전지를 따단다 가서 미네 내가 신을 할게 메쿠셔라. 원투다나 샘전지를 맨자 단다 미디를 맨자지로. 개와냠배 제만 하인데서 그 하다 개와냠바로와. 미다 개와냠바 마로와. 지들 하래서 지들 미래서라. 어디인데 샘전지를 맨자와 단다 미네세 ane kewa nyamba lada kewa nyamba kewa chimada lada kewa nyamba wa kewa nyamba kewe se ane ngombara tube teacher po minus tonda kewa dine pongete da chima yongen de dwen draw mutum bebe kagare so dine de ran pige po ina ne tonda me bana shi chima me ngoro pige yobate ni me da riktum ba ngoro lada riktum ba mara 제마들 할래는 하다를 전전에 전도를 전도라 대체 포함하에 넣어서 야 대치 랍샤
So then how is it not transmigration? Well, from different species of beings arises birth in a common species, and therefore internal dependent arising is not transmigration. So here there are various different types of beings. We are now a human, but we could in the future take birth as a god or as an animal. And it's not as though the being that we are now as a human somehow transfers to that new kind of being, because we see that different species, one could have been a human in the past and then become a different type of being in the future. And because those are different, they are distinct, they are totally like different types of beings, it's not as though there is a transmigration, as though the human being is somehow transferred into being a god. So this is as well for internal dependent arising. It's not a matter of transmigration.
오야 다 나게 던진 레바르 중한테 지다를 교총을 레부총을 컨테스 중그레서 나서라 교총을 레부 첨부 컨테스 중그레서나 레 총을 제발레 레부 레부 첨부 넘버 멤버 용대에서라 레 총을 제 베나 콘도 깨지 찍서 콘도 딱 보러 비세제 깨지 찍서 지나야 제마데 레부들이야 근데 야와다 텐데 깨니 요정부 대고 차기라 야테나시 페 소반도 공야다치 군로 상부 시부지 땅제 개발랍 첨부지 깨지 카셔지 사바이나야 로 까마치 니시나를 사바이나 야 까마가 주나 사바이나 제만 레부데 베 요정부 요야요라 자 나게 개와다 대베레데 춘주지레 삼교와 말에서 대근 레부 빼 첨부 시기그래서 유령분야고에 연구돼서 대송교라 지다를 교총을 대부 첨부 중시나 레 총을 제발에 대부 넘버 멤버 첨부 연구돼서 오라 대실 교총을 대부 넘버 대부 첨부 넘버 도바 주돼서 지다를 용화를 교회 레 제바 대다를 지레다 digital option tibodo tache shakasa ya 교총을 대부신 bungoba dubo sete
No. So then regarding internal dependent arising, how does a great result arise from a small cause? Well, one experiences the ripening of a great result from performing a small karma. So therefore, a great result is produced from a small cause. So here we see how just a moment of really intense anger, although we were only in that kind of intense anger for a moment, it can lead to the result of a ripening result of being a hell being for quite a long time. And so too, on the other hand, when it comes to something like having patience, having a good motivation and engaging in patience, even a few moments, a few minutes of doing that can bring about quite a large ripening result. So we shouldn't think, like we shouldn't sort of disregard karma that we think is small or insignificant, like, oh, that's not important, it's not really going to bring a result, but rather even when it comes to the kind of good or bad causes that we create, the small causes lead to great results. So we shouldn't disregard them.
Oh yeah, this was Tande Nanga Tension Rebar Joade, Chungul Debu Chamber Chunguris. Tita you get your draw some joa. Oh, Yante Chi Tendele Pe, Kuchungul Debu Chamber Chiuarese. Shing Natruta said, Pechan Suda. Sanje Gupa to Shing the Yama, Shizuji were Pechambu Kigdo, Shingde. Oh, tell you Shing Natruta Suda, Tis 70 Chunjuji Madomedoa. Tipatapshana Paya Chambo, Dinashin Pala Jachambu Tendekigres, Chi Tendelia, Kuchungu Chigia, Debu Pechambu Kiguarese. The Nanga Tendelia Teleja, Teleja Jungcha Sora, Kuchunjun Debu Chambu Teleja Pelsa Kigres, or teacher of Sand. Yeah.
So here, when we were talking about external dependent arising, for this fourth kind of characteristic of causes, that a small cause leads to a great result, we talked about the Nyagroda tree, which is something that the Buddha spoke about. This tree being one that, like most trees, I think, have quite a small seed, but it leads to a huge tree, both going upward and outward. This kind of great result arises from a small cause. And when it comes to then internal dependent arising, this is even more the case. It's even greater kind of ability for a small cause to affect a very large result.
Oh yeah. That did it. They done drive you to Chuma Sedra. Take us to oh yeah. Chitar Nyon Juve Le Karasavana Le Kiwe Lech Savana, Debutaya, Nyawa Javan Juve Lech Savana, Mikichula Soba Tendeko Nyawa Chigra. Lada Miliki Lech Savana, Kiwasavana, Lada Miliki. Things you come the Lech Savana, someday Tambun Yibasumba Kawai Kigra, or T and Chitar Nyon Juve Lecheba, a Tedar Nyon Juve and Debu number Mibanyove. Teacher Tedan drive Kudo ose. Kudan drive Debu Chigramato, two Medraji tam the Debu Medraji Ungumares. Then I chiru Jungo Shindo Resit Tabne, Tea de Kushu Kigmara, or Tinashi, Res Tedan drive Kigres. Le Kidi Kanda Khan, Chabina Teda Tumbe Debu Kigres, I teach you.
And then finally, whatever type of karma is performed, the corresponding ripening is experienced. So there is therefore a continuity of what is similar to that. So here, when it comes to internal dependent arising, the same as external dependent arising, there is a continuity of a cause that is similar to the result. That kind of similar result will be brought about. So if we create a negative karma, it is going to bring about a bad result, say being born in a hell realm. If we create positive good karma, we will lead to happier rebirths as, say, a god. If we develop the meditative stabilization, that kind of immovable karma through our meditative equipoise, then that's going to lead to rebirth in the form or formless realms. So when it comes to the kind of causes that we create, the results are going to be of a similar type or a corresponding kind of type.
Oh yeah, talk about this one. Oh, the Dante did this one. That's Zumba Shari Bo, Tension Deborah Jonga, Chumde, Deja Yang Dabar Sumba De, Kan Lala Shiki, Yang Daba, Shebe Shirab Gitar, Yang Daba, Chitawa Shindo, Takbar, Tatita, you can do Saswan, oh, Tezukanga, to Takbar Gundo, Sidu. Two tato, Guma Cheba Sigora, two tato Guma Cheba, Gundo, so meba dance, so that Treva dance. Oh, to the Tandi, Chifu Bagan to Batik Pakatua, Jen says you bangato, oh, the caressing. Chifu Bagan to Batalia, so chat did someone tamjel saw your residual. Wongbo Yores, so the Garaju Misa and I think saw the Chisigua. Some Yores, Wongbo Yores, Samal Wongbo Yores. Soja Tamja Soja Sange Kanja Resigua. Shing that the Somalia saw Yores, some Yores, etc. Wongbo Yores. Kashel Wongbo Tugasan, Kashel Wongbonga, Kashel Wongboshi, Kashel Wongbochik, Rexja Regbamato Maggot and Resigua Conza. O T in the Tazotama Tamja Sonda is so that Cheba Resigora. Tima Resungora. Then Namduna Yoga, Chunshin Chuja, same day in the Loma cum de Neve, Kondaco, Chunshin Rixiba, Loma Kumpa, Cum Dugua, Yimema Massa, Sugar Yima Koya, Shangudua, Sugar Long Yogores, Minas, Kondaco Niku Tegres. And the station Kazali Lakbatuna Pa Cum Duet in the Yora, Kasha Sukem Yora, doesn't Joangi want to get or Nambachana. You may hear that today one could coach you or this or that. Now, consultate some year, Yawata, long bata, today some Tankdoa. 오 딘데디스 요래 디소 더 제바데세 참젤 소 요래 원부 요래 세데도 야 뒤질랍나
So then, this next passage begins, Reverend Shariputra, whoever, by means of perfect discriminating insight, and just so you know, the order in the Tibetan and the English comes quite differently, sees this dependent arising perfectly taught by the Blessed One accordingly, in reality, continuous in perpetuity. So the first of these is that it is something that is constant or continuous. This nature of dependent arising is not something that was created by the Buddha teaching it, but is something that is the reality all the time, continuous in perpetuity. So that's the first of these terms. And then it says, without life, free of life. And this is particularly getting at the kind of assertions made by, say, for example, the Jains. Now, the Jains would say that all things have life, as in, like, even plants and trees have this kind of life force, that they have faculties, one could say, in the way that we have like our five sense powers, although not all of these other living things necessarily have all five of those faculties. They may only have, say, the faculty of touch. They would assert that, well, like, look at these trees, for example. Sometimes they will sort of bend their leaves closed at night, or like put them down, and when the light comes up in the morning, like us humans, we get up out of bed, these leaves will come back up. There are some plants that respond to touch, for example, and so they would say that, well, look, they have faculties, they are alive, this kind of life force pervades all phenomena, well, particularly, like, they would include plants and that as living matter. Now, according to the Buddhist assertion, they would say that those sorts of functions are really just functions of the elements. It doesn't entail that plants have consciousness just because, say, for example, their leaves respond to light and so forth. So here, where it is saying that whoever sees by by means of perfect discriminating insight sees this dependent arising as without life, in this, or free of life, is again refuting the ideas that are put forth by, like, for example, the Jains.
오야 오 뒤인도 가서라 또 뒤인가 저잖아 저소게 말해서 년도다 진짜 왕거래서 그 소도 동에 여나 싱드버진에 째나 고토서 메데바다 직 사나다 직 남규치 땡겨를 되게 때문에 도와서거라 에네 건조데 째네 좀네 양 답샤나 양기가 도와서거라 셈여사 싱드 째네 양 답샤나 되게 여백해봐 요 말해서 양라 메디 가서라 양자 째네 좀네 째나 소여바다 디메나 소 매뱅해봐 요 말해서 미 송대게 양라르 지네 째네 양답샤네 락바 째튼데 째요 말어 저디 규생케 두요 말어 전다 어때서 강간 중에 왕게 용해도가 또저 가스를 아주 짜르 지마 짜지기 뒤전에 짜라 충주도 탱기도 아티데 샤네 또 텐도라고 또 커블리스그라 곧 컵도 봐줘야 짜드 티샤 고추 탱고도 그 코란 중화다 진짜 네배 왕게 지실이 좋아져요라 어 진짜 그래서 디마도 가서라 소예배 왕게 일단 셈예배 왕게 말했어 다 옛날 가져야디 낭박에 소스나 셈다 류니 주 네배 차질을 소스겨라 디요 말어 주신도 소리야 지다야데 소예스 지생게 용도데 맞은 도안을 되지와래 추나를 깨den게 신지 신스마래 짜라지와래 뭐버지 추나리아 깨되그래 아니 추코란도세 추냠도도 조데르는 부여데도 대데그래도 대 추나네 야더나 고감두그라 어디 인도장 거디 겨와줘베 거도 예보에 도안알야 될라 소여스 추네더나 겨와줘바 연구래세 가르스네 그 소데 출레네버래세 tinde르시 허리야 텐데 그 기신도들 소여스나 코란 깨데 Shingdashina Kotsa Tumna Kamdura, Tendre Tola saw you and a sim liebe, the sim da luni draw saw the mayor, Mother Chida could Yishin, Sishina Telestoto the saw Senako, Shida Tanyatana Madreseke Homara, Duena Lati Unguatanda, so chula never in Besera. So Zawal never so Zaw the Cheshanako Kamdura, or Digilam.
Mm. So, here, as for example, in the case of Janes, who would say, like, looking at plants and trees and so forth, that the kind of movements that they engage in are a sign of their having some sort of life, or maybe they would even want to say that they have kind of consciousness. Now, this, as opposed to, in opposition to that kind of view, the Buddhists would assert that those are really just sort of functions of the elements. Like, for example, if one is to say, well, a tree must be alive because when you cut it, if you were to cut off the top of the tree and you sort of put that in the soil, it might be able to regrow. It has this kind of life in it, such that it is able to regrow. Well, if you want to assert that that's the way in which we determine whether something is alive, well, if you chop off a human's limb, it's not like we can just sort of plant that arm and it will grow again, but we all would still assert that humans are conscious. So in this kind of example of like plants and so forth, to say that they are, and like, I guess we might not be able to register it, but if it were the case that, say, a tree had consciousness, when we chop that tree, there should be some sort of symbol, a signal of its distress somehow. Like if we were creating suffering by cutting down that tree, it should be something that is readily available to us. So we can see that there are other examples that we can give of cases where there could be movement or things that look like there's some sort of life force, but it's really just a power of the elements. Like, for example, a magnet. When you have something that is a magnet, it can draw metal things toward it. It can create that kind of movement, but this is not something that is a sign of there being some kind of consciousness. It's not due to having life force. But here, when we are talking about what it means to be alive, this is really the sense of having a body and mind together. Now, we might need to make a kind of distinction between something that is alive in the sense of a term that is more broadly applicable to things like plants, and then being sort of conscious. So for something to be alive doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be conscious. But when we talk about at least the kind of Buddhist understanding of what life is in the sense of this term, like without life or with life, life is really referring to when those body and mind are functioning together. And so taking away or that life force is not something that comes from some sort of like all-pervasive reality, but is when when that particular body and mind are together. So here, the question of something alive versus something being conscious is an important kind of a question.
Oh yeah, what did you mister? And so maybe said, Alia saw the main tannerwa, so and I saw Shane, Rawe Tata. What did you love Shana?
So, and also to say like without life, we could refer to, rather than those other kind of questions, as life is referring to some kind of like an autonomous, independent self. In that way, we sort of perceive that we have this kind of self that exists by itself.
Oh yeah, that Italian didn't matter. Yeah, thought about the lesson. So that Chita Bunita answer. Oh, the Chidar Tala never Nashire said, the Manora Anita, so attend Sheba de Manora race, take you send the Shegara, Manowata, Majibada say, oh, Tende, well, or teach you need to chill up Altamba.
So then, again, this perfect discriminating insight, which sees this dependent arising perfectly, again, as being without life, free of life, and then just as it is, as in the way that accords with reality, and unerring as well, unmistakenly. Again, these two terms are quite similar, but sees dependent arising as it is without any kind of mistake.
마제바다 된담바 마제바셔라 아니 마중아 세데 다다 마중아이나 녜마텐데 종요지레스나 어때 녜마 마중아레세레 야 어떠니 질람나
So then continuing sees this as unborn, as like ultimately unarisen, or unborn, unproduced. And then unarisen is referring to, well, okay, you're saying it's not born now, but maybe it came about in the past, was produced in the past. This too, it didn't come about due to some sort of inherent in the past either.
야 되네 거래 마제바다 마중아다 가발레서 뭐래 드마제 마제바데서 드마제바다 하세라 규진 망본 되발라 때네 어레 나 셴지 마제게 한셴 제바볼라서 버튼데 온거 제바라서 어때죠 규진 되베 제베 칠돈 담바 제바라서 돈 담바 규진 되베 좀 마셔버렸을 텐데 찬데서야 통마 매바다스데 데 통마 매바네 텐데 레세 타마 통마 요마르바 통마 매바레 mikba meba aside dan tambara ane de kanga nganzo meshen bakares na de shen to mare treba da treba nganzo changing tenjin shaji chedan to to yo mare mikba mebe is to to gure se tisigdo ya mikba meba da o tichilamna.
So here again, going through this now unarisen and then not made, as in not created by some kind of creator God, and then unconditioned in the sense that again, not the sort of fabrication or creation of some sort of autonomous actor, but rather is due to the coming together of those causes and conditions. And then unobstructed here as referring to this is understood in a way that is a direct kind of realization, free of the grasping at signs, the sort of normal grasping at true existence or grasping at signs.
제네테레도 아카서레 시와세데라 시와세데 가르치는 공고여르세나테 동해 탐제 시와르 제바 손잔데 테 콤나 아니 팽게레 시와세 테 수도 시와시셔라 제네 지바메와 테 톰게 수 공게레 다음에 제바보메 테스나네 타냐 탐자다 데루도세 근데 테 지바케베 시레세 테 콤게 수용레 참마 셰루레 테나 테나 테 요마르스나 콤게 용구 마르스나 테 콤고 그래 테 카셰르 직바기 요르데 땡원에 고는 직바 탐제 시베 탑데테스 직바 매바 지그마도 직바 용구 마르스 거라야 티시야.
So, sorry, I should have also said baseless in the sense of being objectless. So it's not obstructed with respect to the nature of reality, and it's baseless or objectless in the sense of not grasping at signs. And this is then referred to, and again, we're talking about this perfect discriminating insight that is seeing dependent arising. This is referred to as peaceful, as by meditating on this dependent arising, one leads to the pacification of all suffering. And then the next is fearless. This really, if one has the correct kind of understanding, will not have any kind of fear. Although for some, when they hear that there is no self, that there is no creator or no kind of agent that is in charge, there will be a sense of fear of like, well, what is there left? When one has the proper kind of understanding, it actually brings about a state in which one no longer has any sort of fear. So it is fearless.
오야 다데 직바셔데 동반이 텐데 Kashali Jibaki Yora, into Kotagi Yora. Kasha Yombono Rene, Jibaki Marate, Jibashi Tabshitiri Samgirwa. And Jibaki get in the Eneco Nega Tombani Tan Yomarwa. Till a rocks and a rockbanda tene. Tase the Pumbule Tabare, Pumbule loss, Tayo Mare said a Pumbule Tension, but I'm ever a Shena, Tipengira, or Tichilania. Samal ten Roma, Rotende Yomara, Tombani Temba Subsoche Crusetira, Kashali Jibaki Chedalo and Yagayora. Yeah.
So, in teaching emptiness, there are those who maybe of sharp faculties will not feel any kind of fear, or at least none of this sort of negative kind of fear. But for some students, this is something where if you were to teach them emptiness, the kind of most subtle emptiness right away, it would actually be detrimental to them. So for some, it is better to teach this in a more coarse kind of way, such that they don't give rise to this kind of fear. So to teach the absence of a self that is totally separate and apart from the aggregates, or to teach more coarse levels of emptiness is better for those who might be harmed by immediately teaching the most subtle level of emptiness.
Oh, Michok Basedra. Oh, Tamboko Tende Chene, Tomba Daba Tende Hakona, Shisu Mikiwe Shenye da Trouble Gambatania, Controla Soba Tende Kene Kira, Tunge Yomo Shiva and Druma Resena. Oh, Tombani Kumbe, Lote, Togma Shandag, Michok Base, Shandag Pameba Sotugma Resera. And Seba Meba Dance, Seba Meba Dance, the Carceresne. Oh, Tende. Oh, Dico Casere, Quinte Sandria Yomarese, Seba Mebatase, Tilecha in Biwa. Oh, Casere. Melam Shinto, Simba in Betch, Seba Meva. Yeah, teaching Lapsana.
So,
No.
Mitropade. So this is not something that is to be taken away. So here, if you have developed a proper understanding of emptiness, at least with some level of stability, this can't be sort of taken away by others. Like if later you were to meet a non-virtuous spiritual friend, that kind of proper understanding isn't something that can be stolen or can be taken away. And then this is something that is, as it says here, not exhausted. It's not as though the kind of continuum of this is cut. This is something that remains at all times.
Oh, yeah, talk about this one.
Number
Number Shiva, my Beran to Tomada Reson, this one. Then a Mebada saw, Mebada saw down subtati Nimbu Meverage, Koda, Song Masako, Nimbushita Megarija. And the subset they could mean she subsesha, that was Mindrab Sesha, the subsura. Oh, Tezu Dadavako, Nimbu Meva Sericor. Nimbu Mevata, Neda, the nation to go down to table, you know, Namsam Meteva. Dreda, this is Nazaji Mingsera, Dreda. And it's Sungu dance. Oh, dear Namsa Sungu Mebale Sungu Cheta. Tigbada, and the Kare, Midabada, Tungiawada, Tongbada, Tameba Yanda Bachis Tomatene, Ta Debit Oreta, Meda Dongeton Tamil Soba Rawe, Tameba Tonsona. And they take it down, David, you know, standing as well as around, she said, the Mahobana Karaka, Karalando, and the Tender Samu Mabuyora, Kandajili Kivina, or Tender Samu to the young Maris Sugura. Dan David on the Juma Shigam, when the David on the Majuma Shigam, Dan David on the Chishidun Juro, Dan David on the. Oh, that is search on the search on the camera. Oh, Dan David on the Chita Bush in Jurium to Medoko say. Oh, Tende Tombani Thompson the Sevara to the Nezi Abushana. Gee, Ta Mao Betuna Chita Burjuro. Where the Ta Mao Betuna and Juma Mijuro. 마음에 드나 지른 주로 마음에 드나 지다보시도 주로냐베 탈라메도 다단다 라오에 다여바 삼데 텐데 삼로테 매버쳐겨라 텐데 주르냐고 말고 그치 다디우치야 텐데 디치시에세 디치다보시 지른 주로 텐데 심지안데다 간에원 심지안도도 담보 간에 용어를 삼 라오에 삼로 코시거라 데네 시페네 간도 도아리 주로 냐바다로 텐데 삼로테 용마레 시거도 디버도 찔람나
No.
So,
No.
yeah.
So here, then, again, so as this is whoever sees this dependent arising perfectly as an essential nature that is not pacified. This isn't something that is removed or pacified through the application of an antidote. And then the next list and regards it as and all of these are sort of terms for without essence. And the list that is given here is slightly different than what is actually in the text. I'm not sure where they're getting some of these, but and regards it as non-existent, trifling, hollow, without essence, and then diseased, infected, a thorn, evil, impermanent, suffering, empty, and selfless. He does not reflect upon the past. So here, someone who has had this kind of understanding of dependent arising that regards it as something that is then not truly existent, not sort of substantially existent in the way that we normally hold it to. So all of these are terms for without essence. And there's a term here in this list that usually means rice. Here it seems to be the name of some kind of a disease. So someone here who has had this kind of development of discerning wisdom, who has is no longer holding to this autonomously existent self, he does not reflect upon the past. Did I exist in the past or did I not exist in the past? What was I in the past? How was I in the past? So again, this is for someone who does not see this autonomously existent self. They've come to realize it to be empty. They will not hold these sorts of ideas of like, well, how was I in the past? What was I in the past? And nor will they reflect upon the future. Will I exist in the future or not exist in the future? In the future, what will I become? In the future, how will I exist? So this is the kind of understanding of someone who has realized emptiness.
Oh, yeah, don't do lotion. Jidena Tawa Tadeva Tamambuyora, Shidata, Dramata Mambuyora, Jidena Kichongam se, Tramseam se, Jenda Nambatu, Kichong Yora, Rub the Chong Yora, Tisser. Tramse to Tula Chin to say. Tramse Tadeva Kandayova, Tatawa Tademambuyos, Tato Mawatan Demba, Tayo se, Simjento Mawatan Demba, Soto Mawatan Demba, oh, the Nikasato Mawatan Demba, Tato to do it. Round Tata to Kangacha. Trashi Suya, Trashi Mashita, the Trashi Betar, and the Tramashi Betar, and the Mabusha, the Toti Trashi Mawata say. Ne Dembataja Runde say. Yoata, Lagbar Yoata, the Gaba the Shumbalis, the Yo, Jabba Shumba. And do it. You also share a Tawana Chet, say. And the Italian Gojabasha to Ranshin to make a mega Bechento. Juro, Chumbashari, Bukala, Serba, de Tabuda, the Tension de Bonjoa, Yandaba Kondo Chube, the Shinshaba Tajon by Yandaba Toba Sanja Shabna, the Oshawood, Jidanjin Bakyo, the College of Alanma, Adam Menam Jitumba, Sanja Chumden, the Yandaba Toba, Sanja Juro, Chumden, the Yandaba Toba, Sanja and Juro Shelanama, Yandaba Toba, Shajudo. Long time to Chanju Samba Shambo Chambe. The guys in Mena Setan Temba Sharibu, the Latam with the Lama to such a bench, then year and some then they just Papa Chambe Sheba along number two. Then they enjoy Chambata Sharibu that in the true to let Chan Yungua. You know, Sanjay go to Ken Tambune. The shoot engine about Joa and Chotonga Song, Shandama to Mambana take the Shaggy some corner. Tata Tumba Sanja Chumden Nawa, this is the Cochingila Becarendora. Shene Sumbeka, Chijina Beka, Chesuna Bekase, Sanje Karendo, or did you?
So again, this kind of individual who has an understanding of emptiness will not think about the present. What is this? How is this? What is there? What will this become? From where has this being come? Having departed from this world, where will it go? So here we're just going to read then the rest of this. So in the world, whatever different philosophical views of ascetics and Brahmins there are, so ascetics could refer to those who take renunciation, like for example, becoming monks or nuns. The Jains also have some ascetic practices. So whatever different philosophical views of ascetics and brahmanas there are, namely belief in the self, belief in a life force, belief in a person, belief in the festive and salutary. So there are those who sort of look for good signs and kind of base their ideas upon that. Excessive movement and lack of movement, those views that at that time have been eliminated, comprehended, and uprooted by that one, like the top of a palm tree that does not later appear. They are dharmas that do not arise or cease. So, Reverend Shariputra, if someone possessing such forbearance for the dharma correctly understands this dependent arising, for that one, the Tathagata Arhat, complete Buddha, the one endowed with knowledge and good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, captain who disciplines beings, the unsurpassed, the teacher of gods and humans, Buddha, the blessed one, will predict the unsurpassed, perfectly complete enlightenment, saying, you will become a perfectly complete Buddha. And so the Bodhisattva great being, Maitreya, having spoken thus, the venerable Shariputra and the world of humans, gods, asuras, and Gandharvas rejoicing, praised the explanation by the Bodhisattva, the great being Maitreya. The noble Mahayana Sutra, entitled The Rice Seedling, is completed. So here again, the Buddha had taught this initial phrase of whoever sees dependent arising sees the Dharma, and whoever sees the Dharma sees the Buddha, but he didn't teach then beyond that. So Shariputra went and asked Maitreya, what is the meaning of this? And so it is really through the Buddha's kind of power, through the Buddha's blessings, that this exchange between Maitreya and Shariputra took place. And it is then, this is kind of like speech of the Buddha that is empowered, or another is empowered to or blessed to give the speech of the Buddha. So this is what has occurred then throughout the Rice Seedling Sutra, is really the intention of the Buddha as explicated by Maitreya.
Oya Chagarke to Shali Sudan Basudra. They get a power solution bend. Oh, don't go to left show, Pebelo Sute. La Kera Lakam did it. Oh, Taya Johnson. Yeah. Oh, dear Karshuda. Sharawasti, duty, Kinding so diva. Oh, Tamati Solution bend, the Pecha de Sheston, I think I share. And you cannot to the Yabu Kingre. Taina de Yakasura. Saba Yange, you are the Sigda, Tendation, that Yange, you are the Sida. It really loved the Embashine, Haku, remember Shisha, Lapshania, Hamaguda, the Mato Yabu Kingre. Those on Gors, the catching Mariakashe. Saba Saja in it, those really loved and young Jaya, the Chibata, the Chins, all the Shidashema got it. Yahushida Chonso. Oh, and in the day, under session to Chikabushita here. Tanda Maubana Yabutina, and Anzundi. Oh, rejecting what the share so. Rejecting what the Chema Sanda, what you shall teach a man and go to now.
Lare.
Sada, met the picture that to teacher. That's Janamato. Oh, Namsayam, oh, to change, Tamal. Jesuit, Yabucho, so to share, yeah.
No. So I'll just read the title again, as this is the tradition to sort of begin the beginning again, to kind of keep that continuity going. So the Rice Seedling Mahayana Sutra, and here I have engaged in this kind of explanation, although I think that all of you gathered at the nunnery probably have a very good understanding of these things. Maybe there are some who are new, who are listening, and so I have given a little bit more explanation of some of these things that kind of come up repeatedly in this text. And so I have done that really for the purpose of those who might not have as much familiarity with it. I think that all of you who are at Sravasti have a good understanding of this material. And I would just like to say I rejoice that we have had the opportunity to give these teachings. It makes me very happy to do so. And as far as starting up the precious garland, Geshe says he needs a little bit of time, maybe a week, to be able to get his texts ready. I'm assuming you all will deal with the scheduling, but we will be continuing then with the precious garland of Nagarjuna. And just to reiterate how wonderful it is that we have been able to go through all of these teachings. And it makes me very happy to have been able to give this to all of you. So we will see you again soon, but take a little break before that.
네, 로자올라 토시에 야부쳐서서.
Oh, no.
예. 로자 토시.
Just and thank you to the translator. So.
Geshe, thank you so much for these teachings. Whether we're old students or new students, it's always good to hear them again, and the teachings go in deeper, and things that we didn't understand before now become clear. So thank you so much for your perseverance with teaching us again and again, and many texts and many teachings. It's a wonderful thing of the causes and conditions coming together in our precious human rebirths to have these teachings. And Katrina, I cannot thank you enough for your translation. For those of us who never learned Tibetan, you're the link with these teachings. So you worked hard to learn the language and to learn the meaning of the teachings. So thank you very much too.
Thank you. Again, ta tukchena ta di ngamane jangna yang ta yangyar koya di kechemporowa ngansoki koya di saru dogres ani ngune chena tukchena kerangi sunru mangbo yores ta nganso mutune sungchenang yala tukchena sheyi. Yeah.
Welcome. Also, welcome to you.
Yes. And since we have a lot of desire for more teachings, a virtuous kind of desire, then we're requesting both of you to be healthy and to live long and to continue to do what the Buddha said in terms of benefiting sentient beings. That's what you're both doing.
Ta mutune sungchen naya la tukche na ani kirang se ringbo shuya di ngansa rewa yes karere ta mutune sungche nyaya gi deba yores ra ta den shuronas.
다 우주 잡게 생애만 나시 르바 세고 말에 그저 양내 양도 로나마도 로첨부 손잡고 다 이나고 집행그래서 우주 잡 양자로 된데 지와 전부 세고 매가 제 가시 된데 용거래 하여튼 이나 이자게
In his humility, Geshe is saying that his awareness isn't quite as sharp as it used to be, and so it takes a little bit more effort. He has to read things again and again, but of course he is always happy to do this, even compensating, he says, for his old age. So.
We're aging too.
Nanso sama geru dogreroa.
So we need to put forth more effort.
Sunru tengorero, usugyao gores. Koyala.
This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, foreland, sun and moon. the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of lovesome's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. In the snowy mountain pure land, you're the source of good and happiness. Powerful Tenzing Gyatso Chenrezi, may you stay until samsara ends. The one who, due to his radiant wisdom of vast and profound knowledge, is esteemed amongst teachers of limitless scriptures, who takes care of his students in many skillful ways. May the great Geshe Yeshe Thabkhe have a long life.
그냥 투진하게.
뭐야?
여보지요.
뭐야야?